くでやだ。メイクしたって変わんないし、ダイエットしたって体が綺麗になったって結局顔がこんなんだったら意味ないしさ。
自分の見た目がなんかもうとにかく嫌で、なんか外とかにもう出れなくなっちゃうみたいな。
動きはね、悪くないみたい。
家族にね、一人、だから死んだらね、もう告別式もないし、お通夜もないし、一人でひっそりあの世に行く。
These videos you're watching, they really happen every day in Japan. Thousands of people, young and old, live completely alone, often without anyone noticing. Some even end up passing away like this, and people only find out weeks later. And it's not due to poverty or violence. It is something that was born within a society that seems perfect to the world. Organized, wealthy, advanced, but inside it hides a very sad reality that few people will show you. In this video, we are going to dive into the lonely and sad life that many Japanese people have, and understand how and why so many people choose or are forced to withdraw from everyone. You will discover how loneliness has become a threat to Japan's existence and how the government is desperate to try to solve this. Hikikomori is a Japanese word that, in simple translation, means something like extreme social isolation. These are people who choose to completely distance themselves from others, shut themselves inside a house, and start living as if the outside world doesn't exist. I've made some videos in the past talking a bit about this, but I've never really delved deep into this phenomenon, which involves many people in Japan. It's a much more dangerous thing than it seems. Many people compare hikikomori and say they are like the hermits of the past. Hermits are those people who isolated themselves in caves or mountains to seek spirituality, to try to get closer to God. The difference is that in the case of hikikomori, the reason is not philosophical or religious at all. On the contrary, it is something much sadder. It is a silent abandonment of society. It's almost like a form of giving up on life in communities. This phenomenon began to be observed mainly among young Japanese people who couldn't cope with the huge pressure they face in everyday life, and in academic life too. Japan is known precisely for its discipline and very strict rules, and those who cannot keep up with this pace end up feeling like a failure. Many of these young people prefer to shut themselves in their rooms for months, sometimes even for years, without studying, without working, without talking to anyone. They give up on everything. It didn't seem like a big problem back then, but nowadays the number is downright frightening. Recent research estimates that there are over 1.5 million people living as hikikomori in Japan. And it's not just young people. This lifestyle has also spread to older adults and even the elderly. The generation that once saw this as a teenage thing, a youth problem, is now basically going through the same thing. There are many, many elderly people living in isolation in Japan. Then came the pandemic, the forced isolation, the fear of going out, the ease of living everything through the internet. And all of this together only accelerated this process. People who were already vulnerable dove headfirst into this withdrawal. Others who had never even thought about isolating themselves ended up finding in this lifestyle a kind of escape, even if it's not a very good thing. The government doesn't really know what to do to get these people out of their homes and convince them to return to their normal lives. And this problem is just the tip of the iceberg. It's much more serious than it seems. Because if you don't have people leaving their homes to study, to work, Japan simply doesn't function. But this didn't happen out of nowhere. It's not something that only affects young people. This phenomenon is the result of how Japanese society has been built over the past few decades. There is a whole culture of pressure and competition that ends up shaping the life of every Japanese person from a very young age. And I need to explain this to you, because when you understand how life in Japan works, it will make more sense why so many people isolate themselves. Japan is a country known worldwide for its discipline, for its effort, and also for its organization. But what we often don't see is the enormous burden that this model places on people's shoulders. From a very young age, Japanese people are thrown into a very tough competition system. In school, for example, there is a huge demand for performance. Difficult exams, rankings among the best students, extremely selective entrance exams. Failure in one of these stages can mark a person's entire life. And in Japan, failing is not just getting a low grade. It's something that brings shame and even a lot of social judgment. It's as if you have no value if you can't keep up with the pace. This creates a society where many people constantly live in fear of not measuring up. And it's not just at school. When they enter the job market, the pressure increases even more. Japanese companies are known for demanding long hours, absolute loyalty, and often the employee's personal life disappears. Work becomes the only thing you have in your life. And if you can't adapt to this, Japanese society doesn't forgive you. Japan has a very strong culture of unspoken rules. These are small norms that everyone expects you to follow. It can range from how you behave in public to the type of job you have. And if you don't follow these invisible rules, you are seen as different, as someone who doesn't fit in. In Japan, this kind of person is someone who will be judged and excluded. Another significant issue is bullying, known there as ijimi. Many young people go through severe humiliations at school, leaving lifelong scars. All of this together creates a very suffocating environment. It's an environment where the pressure to fit in is so great that for some people, isolation seems like an increasingly better option. And this is precisely where the problem begins. The main motivation for someone to become a hikikomori is exactly this: not being able to bear the pressure of life in modern Japan. When everything you do seems to revolve around grades, performance, status, success, those who can't keep up end up opting for withdrawal, for solitude. And here's a very important detail. Unlike many countries, Japan doesn't have widespread poverty or great destitution. Most families live in relatively good conditions. Japan is a wealthy country. This means that many young people can afford to isolate themselves because they know they have a roof over their head, food, and that their parents will support them for quite a while. Moreover, the country also offers easy means to maintain this lifestyle. Delivery services, convenience stores, the internet. They cater to virtually all your needs, and you rarely need to leave the house to resolve anything. So Japan, unintentionally, has created the perfect conditions for someone to lock themselves in a room and no longer have a social life. But this is also very risky and complicated because most of the time, it's the parents who support these children. Most people have a good life, but what happens when the parents are gone? Who will take care of these people? How will they survive after spending decades without contact with the real world? This is Japan's great fear. This is the government's fear, in fact, not only losing part of the active population, but also having to deal with an entire generation of dependent adults, people who will no longer know how to live in society. And as if that weren't serious enough, this phenomenon is no longer just a youth issue. Isolation has also affected an increasing part of Japan's elderly population. There are many retirees who, after leaving the workforce, end up distancing themselves from everything and everyone. Sometimes it's because they no longer have family nearby. Other times, it's because the bond with children and relatives has faded over time. Many simply choose to live alone, with no contact with anyone anymore. In the case of the elderly, loneliness may seem like a choice, but often it is not. It is a consequence of a society that aged too quickly without creating mechanisms to sustain human connections. Japan has one of the highest life expectancies in the world, but it also has one of the lowest birth rates. In other words, more and more people are reaching old age, and fewer people are being born to stay close to them. The result is a country with millions of elderly people living alone. Some almost invisibly. They don't need much to survive. A small apartment, a relatively modest pension, a delivery at the doorstep, or even a quick trip to a convenience store across the street practically takes care of everything. And when we combine the aging population with this growing isolation, the situation becomes even more concerning. Because we are not just talking about young people without future prospects, but also about elderly individuals who have disconnected from the world and prefer to spend their last days in solitude. This isolation of the elderly ends up revealing one of the saddest sides of Japan. because it's not just about living alone. In many cases, these people also die alone, and someone only notices after a long time. This is where a phenomenon that even earned its own name in Japan arises: Kotakushi. In Japan, there is an expression called Kotakushi, which literally means lonely death. This word is used to describe exactly that: people who die alone in their homes, and they go unnoticed for days, weeks, sometimes even a few months. This phenomenon began to draw attention in the 1980s when the country saw the number of elderly people living alone skyrocket. But nowadays, it is no longer restricted to just older people. Middle-aged adults, and even some young hikikomori, also fall into this very sad statistic. Often, it is the mailman or the landlord who notices something strange when mail piles up or rent goes unpaid. This is a stark portrayal of what it means to live completely alone. No one notices your absence, even when you cease to exist. This situation has become so common in Japan that there are even companies specializing in cleaning apartments where someone died alone. This is a real market, sustained precisely because this happens often. The work of these companies, in fact, goes beyond cleaning. They have to deal with the effects of decomposition, with the smell embedded in the walls, in the furniture, and the mere fact that this exists already shows how problematic the situation is. And when we look at all of this together, the young people who lock themselves up at home, the elderly who choose to live in solitude, even the companies specialized in dealing with these cases, it's clear that it's not an individual problem. It's something that threatens even the future of Japan. The government is increasingly concerned, because nowadays the country already has a big problem: less workforce, a rapidly aging population, and when a large portion of people starts refusing to study, work, or even leave the house, this becomes a threat to the economy. But the problem is not just economic, it's also social. How are you going to reintegrate these people after years, even decades? It's very curious to see this, isn't it? Japan is one of the most advanced and organized societies in the world, but at the same time, there are such terrible and difficult things happening there, a place where people simply no longer see the point in living in society. How does such a rich and organized country reach this point? I really like Japan. I think it's an incredible country, but there are many silent problems happening. And in the end, maybe the price of living in such a beautiful, organized society might be precisely the loneliness that almost no one sees. What will happen to Japan in a few years? We don't have an answer for that yet. Comment below what you think about all this, and I'll see you in this video that's appearing here on your screen.